exciting, but I also like the fact that the people that we're going to have a chance to hear from today are pretty incredible. And in terms of the work that they're doing and what they're building in their own respective organizations is really fabulous. And I know that you will enjoy hearing from them. So they're really going to give us an update. They're going to give us an update regarding their tech, their initiatives, what they're planning, you know, maybe a little peek into security and some of the things that actually plague and warm their futures as well. So feel free to add your comments. You have a chat. Add your comments, your questions, your conversations. We'll try to take most of your questions at the end of the panel. So that's what we're doing today. And just be cognizant that if you have noise going on in the background, as I do, and I promise to put you on mute as soon as I finish, because I have a singing puppy that is adamant about me not joining you this morning. So if you hear that, know that she's a little off key. So I want to do some thank yous, okay? Thank yous to the sponsors, because that's who makes this possible for us. And that's part of our ecosystem. They're people who provide services and provide products that make sure that the roles that everyone has are part of the ecosystem. Because if we don't have products and services, it's very hard for people in tech to actually do their jobs. So CGI, I just want to tell you a little bit about CGI. They were actually founded in 1976. They're one of the world's largest IT and business consulting services firms. They have over 400 people right here in Pittsburgh. So they have people, a little bit of folks that are in the Great Lakes region as well, but today we have representation from Pittsburgh. They have actually been in Pittsburgh for 30 years. And they develop innovative solutions side by side with their clients, and they have their own innovation center. So if you don't know them, you can look up cgi.com, I believe. So we have supporting sponsors, and if you haven't heard of them, I'm going to tell you a little bit about them as well. So we have Okta. They're an independent provider of identity for the enterprise. So they have an identity cloud that enables organizations to secure, connect the right people to do the right technologies at the right time. They have over 6,500 pre-built integrations to applications and infrastructure providers. So they have over 8,400 organizations, including companies such as Engie, JetBlue, Nordstrom's, Takeda Pharmaceutical, Teach for America, T-Mobile, Twilio, trust Okta to help prevent and protect the identities of their workforces and companies. So Snowflake, you may have heard about Snowflake recently. Snowflake, they had a recent IPO, and they help organizations unleash the value of their data, which we all know we have way too much of, to use easily, and they have a low-cost platform for managing and democratizing enterprise data. So they've enabled secure and governed data across 100 to 200 times the performance over their competition, and it's delivered as a service with near zero maintenance. So, and certainly last but not least is Tier 1 Performance, and they are an employee-owned consulting firm. I ask you to look up their background. It's very, very interesting, and they activate strategies through people. So if you think about things like change management, anything that it takes to implement new technologies, they are a certified B Corp. They're passionate about consulting, designing, and building people-centered business solutions and that deliver long-term success. So I wanted you to know about each and every one of them. Thank you for listening to my overview of them. They are an important piece of the ecosystem. So I am going to pass the baton, now that my dog is quiet, pass the baton, and I'm pleased to introduce David Kane. He is the founder and CEO of a company called Ethical Intruder. He is going to kick off today's discussion, and I'll be here, and I'm going to be on mute though because she just has started a new song. So thank you all for being here, and I'm here, but I'm going on mute.
Thank you, Audrey. Welcome everybody. Definitely looking forward to some great conversation this morning, and looking forward to talking about how we move forward from the current situation that we're in with COVID. I think it's going to be some great conversations that we have. I think everybody saw up on the screen who's here today, but I think we're going to start out by having everybody go ahead that's on the panel and do a quick introduction of yourself. So let's go ahead and start with Bill. You want to go ahead and introduce us to you?
Yeah. Bill Balint, CIO up at IUP, 14-year member of the Pittsburgh Technology Council myself, and just celebrated my 31st anniversary of working at IUP.
Great, thank you. All right, Ken Spangler, do you want to go ahead next and introduce everybody to yourself?
Sure. Good morning, everyone. Ken Spangler, Executive Vice President of Global Operating Company Technologies for FedEx Corporation. I native of Pittsburgh. My job is in Memphis, but I spend a lot of time in both places. And like Bill, I'm in my 31st year. And I started at FedEx Ground in Pittsburgh with FedEx and was a longtime CIO there. And have the CIOs of the operating companies would report to me. Great to be here.
All right, Summer Fowler, go ahead and introduce yourself to everybody and let us know a little bit about you.
Hi there, I'm Summer Fowler. I'm the CIO and CISO at Argo AI. Argo is a self-driving car company located in the Strip District of Pittsburgh. I've been at Argo just over 23 months, so not quite 31 years, but hopefully I'll get there. Before I came to Argo, I was at Carnegie Mellon University CERT program for 11 years, and I'm still really associated with Carnegie Mellon, teaching their exec programs, graduate programs. And I guess another thing about me, my real full-time job is that I am the hockey mom for my son's travel ice hockey team. Everything else, sort of falls to the wayside after hockey mom. So.
There you go. Great, thank you. All right, and last but not least, David DiLeo. Do you want to go ahead and introduce everybody?
Yeah, sure. Good morning. My name is David DiLeo. I'm the CIO at Industrial Scientific Corporation here in Pittsburgh. Been with Industrial Scientific for 7 years. Maybe just a quick 2 minutes on Industrial Scientific. Founded in 1985. We're a leading gas detection, manufacturing, and repair company with a big focus, though, on data and analytics and really employee health and safety. With regard to Pittsburgh, I am a 10-year Pittsburgh native, originally from Connecticut, but like most people, I got indoctrinated pretty hard and quickly into the Pittsburgh way, and happy to do that. So looking forward to the conversation this morning with the rest of the panel.
All right, great. Thank you, David. All right, and again, my name is David Kane. I am the CEO and founder of Ethical Intruder, and we are excited to go ahead and get started. So Bill, we're going to start with you with the first question, and you're going to be the only person. We're going to give you a question, and then I have a brief comment before you answer. But so Bill, being that you're in the university educational space, you are very familiar with every year having, I don't know what the number is, but let's say 25% turnover with freshmen coming in, seniors going out. So you're constantly seeing, a lot of user change. And you also are seeing a lot of students coming in and probably wanting to add every type of technology to your environment. Yeah. So how did the question would be, and then I'm going to do my comment. The question is, how did this constant change help to prepare you for what we just went through over the last 9 months? And before you answer, we came up with this question for last week when at the Tech 50, Bill and IUP did win the COVID Pivot finalist. They were the finalists in the COVID Pivot category. So I think you're well equipped to help answer this question.
Okay. Well, first of all, thank you, and thank to the Tech Council for the Tech 50 award. It was stunning for us and so unexpected. But so the circumstances are, for those of you that don't work in this environment as an IT executive, it's really a double-edged sword. The one thing is that over 50% of your user base turns over from August to August, right? I mean, so, you have 2 incoming freshman classes and 2 incoming graduate classes. That will be more than 50% of your user base. So when you introduce a new technology, the one thing you have to remember is if you started on Labor Day, that by the time you come to the next Labor Day, half the people, that's all they know. They never knew what was there before. And that is really empowering in some ways in a higher education setting to be able to adapt to change. It's kind of baked into that DNA because of it. So that's, that's all great. But the downside of it is as was mentioned, students, when somebody comes in and they're 18 years old right now, they're not looking for the same technology that the 58-year-old employee that's been there 35 years is looking for. So you have to try to balance this. And that's one side to what happened with COVID. There, I mentioned it for the first time this morning. But the challenge really is that when you're in an education setting, we now have to have more users using more tools to get their job done. Students before could kind of self-select what technologies they wanted to use. If they wanted to be more like, textbook, old-fashioned, a little bit more limited with technology, they could survive. Same thing with our employees, definitely. But now you really can't. In our case, it's Microsoft Teams, Zoom, learning management system. Now all your textbooks are with a website. All your library resources are electronic. That's really a challenge because now everyone has to have that and they have to do it. So it really puts a strain on the user because of their comfort levels much lower, because you have all these other users that weren't using this stuff before that didn't want technology. And that's what's really made it a lot tougher in that respect. So I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, that's great. Anybody else on the panel before we move on to another question? Any best practices? Again, we want to, after this conversation, sort of move forward, but any best practices about what you learned that, maybe you could share as far as how we will keep continuity?
Well, I'll tell you one thing. It's about the customer. That's what it brings into focus.
Yeah, I would dovetail maybe onto what Bill has said. I mean, obviously not from an educational perspective, but this idea of employee experience, certainly I think that's the reset button has been hit quite a bit here on what employees expect, and certainly new students transitioning into the workforce. I think their expectations for connectivity, for being able to be mobile, have access to everything. I think there's certainly, I think, a shift. Certainly, we've all been talking about mobility for years, but I think there's certainly a step change in expectations. And within our company, Industrial Scientific, that's something we're really looking at across the board. And we're part of actually a larger. We have a parent company, Ford Corporation. So we're one of about 17 companies now, and that's something that we're really thinking about going forward, is this seamless employee experience to help drive retention and talent.
David, this is Ken. I'll add in, clearly I relate to the employee experience side of this. When this first happened, I mean, like everybody else, nobody expected the scale of this to be global and around the world. And so, we had the kind of the bimodal challenge of protecting employees that could work remote, and for all the reasons. And then we have a lot of frontline people. And so, in both cases, we had to double down and go really hard. But for those who had to work remote, obviously securing, protecting, and enabling that, scaling it was one thing. But the other thing that I would say is lessons learned is, I would actually argue in some cases, our connectivity has never been better. Having global teams, I see my teams more than ever. It used to be when I was in the regions or traveled. Now we're on Zoom all the time. So one of the things that I kind of went to is the video connectedness is so much better than just audio. So we definitely, we not only scaled and protected, but we made sure we stayed very connected. And then with some of the technologies today, literally keeping people informed and over communicating. We were doing global town halls with thousands of people, taking live chat questions. And we realized those type of activities became so important in this time, and they're very appreciated. But then there was the other side of it. As it went on and on and on, we had to be very cautious about work-life flow. The connectivity became so powerful and so great, you can over-rotate. And so, I think the end game is it's about balance, and it's about doing the right things to protect people, but also recognizing that just because there's not a physical beginning, like somebody gets into a car or a train to go to work and then goes home at the end of the day, we had to watch those boundaries as well.
Right. Hey, Summer, let's add on to that a little bit. So we've talked about the fact already about the user experience and some of the connectivity. But as we move forward, where do you think are some of the opportunities or possibly some of the gaps with technology of how we could make this even better than what it is today?
Yeah, the biggest area that we have seen, and I really resonate with what Ken is saying about all hands, about working together. Argo is a really, really collaborative place, and you can see it in our offices, in our spaces. It's a lot of soft seating and whiteboard areas where engineers are coming together, working on the boards. We have lots of various conference rooms. We have a physical space that is for our all hands. It's called Mount Washington. All of our conference rooms are named after neighborhoods in Pittsburgh. So we have this large area. Well, now everyone's at home. And the biggest gap area that we're seeing are in collaborative tools, whiteboarding capabilities. How do we share information? How do we draw with each other? Because we do a lot of, I have the blue pen, you have the purple pen, let's work together, let's map things out. We've tested a lot of tooling. Interestingly, there's some software that's available. It doesn't meet some of our privacy terms and conditions, right? And so we have some challenges in that space. And then also even just, this is an interesting concept, we've tried things like Wacom tablets, where people will draw and then it will show up on the screen, but it's different than drawing on an iPad, which not everyone has, because you're drawing and you're disconnected. You're drawing in one hand and looking at another spot rather than drawing and looking at the same time. So it's just been a lot of challenge with our engineers working data flows together, working design together. So I imagine that we're going to see an explosion in collaboration tools and capabilities, and boy, do we welcome that.
And anyone else on the panel see other opportunities or gaps? And again, even with the collaboration tools, I think as Ken mentioned, I think we're all really, excited and happy about how we got to where we are today. But anyone else on the panel see some other opportunities of how we can even strengthen what looks like is going to be a longer term situation of, collaborating from both the home and the office?
I think I can add to that a bit. I think, one of the things that we've identified is certainly we've done a great job, I think, of, keeping the lights on, the tactical aspects of serving the business through IT. And again, we've started to pivot our discussions to innovation. We think we're doing a good job keeping the trains on time, but now it's how do we innovate and speed our product development? And actually very similar to what Summer said, we've tried several different tools, and I think some have a lot of pros and cons, but we're starting to really think about the opportunity to start to really maybe create more collaborative, safe spaces where we could potentially start to have people in a hybrid way, maybe some people gathering together, some people virtual, and starting to bring some collaboration to life again in a physical space. So that's just something that we've, as a bridge, recognizing that there's tool gaps right now. Certainly it doesn't for people that are within the local area. We think we could safely do that. And so that's something we're exploring here and doing some pilots and experiments with over the next 6 weeks.
So another add-on question, I guess, to this topic, which we've seen with a lot of our customers, and for those who maybe are listening in that are also, CIOs or leaders in this space, we have a lot of companies that, are now referencing a lot more than usual because of all the collaboration added tools, that they're either more of a Microsoft shop or more of a Google shop. And they're trying to figure out whether they're storing things in, Google Cloud, or are they doing it on OneDrive, and they're trying to bring in all these other devices. Have any of you seen any restrictions or opportunities between those different platforms as far as how you work together?
So I would say I can jump in with this one. We did over the summer, so during the month of June, Argo acquired a company in Munich, Germany. as part of our Volkswagen, the investment that Volkswagen made into the company. And we had some challenges in porting. So the company that we were working with was very Microsoft focused. Argo is a Google shop, as you noted, between the two. And so there were some challenges importing things, even just like email. I will say on a very positive note, and something that's great about Pittsburgh, we have a really good support team from Google here in the Pittsburgh office. So they worked with us, they helped us to make that as smooth of a transition as it could be. But I think even just not in a COVID world, just in a general world, yeah, we see that division. You know, what type of shop are you? What are you working with now? It's nice that most vendors are really opened up and supportive of lots of platforms. A challenge that we have seen in when it comes to platforms is we have 3 different environments, 3 different platforms that we use heavily. Windows is actually our smallest. We have Mac, we have Linux. We've seen some pretty significant challenges in software inventory and metering tools that can handle all 3 platforms. And so if I'm going to think of another opportunity space, that would be a great one. And in fact, we're doing some development with open source tools at this point because we can't find a tool that actually works across all of our environments. But yeah, I think that that's a challenge, COVID or not. We've been fortunate that we've had really good partners with Google, specifically in our Pittsburgh office.
All right, let's do a question for Ken. Or Ken, were you about to have a comment?
Go ahead. I'll jump in.
Okay. So we already had this question, but I think this obviously fits really well with FedEx. One of the pre-event questions we had is what shifts did you make and how you serve your customers? And I think everybody has seen on a daily basis how FedEx has shifted. But how do you, it's almost as if FedEx and some other similar organizations, were really ahead of the curve to sort of tackle how this happened. How did this emerge so quickly that it seemed you were able to respond to how you handle customers and maybe what's coming up in the future?
Well, it's a great question. And in some cases, you're good. In some cases, you're lucky. And we're going to take credit for a little bit of both. And I'll tell you why that is. And we'll think of this as physical and digital, in the physical world and the digital world. In both cases, we were in a period of aggressive expansion. And, we are still run. Our chairman is still our founder, Fred Smith. And he is, one of the world's great entrepreneurs. But he was driving ahead because of what e-commerce was, and because the future is almost a long-term CAGR of, double-digit growth. We were being very aggressive in how we were expanding our physical network, not only in the US, but around the world. But at the same time, from a technology standpoint, the way we connect to our customers, much more real-time connectedness, driving ahead with IoT technologies for really high-end premium products. And so what we thought would happen in the 2025 and beyond timeframe, the term we've been using is the world slingshotted to our strategy. So, part of it's being good and part of it's lucky in the sense that we were just doing this and now we're able to take advantage of it earlier. So to be more specific though, in the physical network is about the growth and expansion. In the digital side of it, it was about much more real-time connectedness between shippers who ship packages and recipients who receive them. Our products like FedEx Delivery Manager, when you can have visibility of what's coming or redirect to hold or do many things like that, all of those expansions became very important. And now, as I mentioned, IoT, some of the things about sensor-based technologies or sensor-based logistics for us has really played well for what is going to be one of our most important missions of our entire 40-some year history, and that is the vaccine distribution. So, I won't take forever, but I would say in both cases, we were fortunate that we were just in an aggressive time to go hard at the future, and then the future came sooner than anybody would have guessed. And that's true about, by the way, the part I was going to add in, I'll link these together right now. Whenever, obviously we're a large global company and, we have more than 500,000 employees. But all over the world, about 100,000 had to go work from home, shelter in place. And we were fortunate to scale there. Even, we were just, VPN, Okta is interesting because that's where we were going. And the ability to scale it literally in 2 weeks, honestly, surprised even us. We were literally able to scale it in 2 weeks. And because we have a genealogy of a lot of acquisitions, we're often fighting different technologies into our standard. But in this case, the benefit of being a Teams shop and using Teams strongly, but also, historically having WebEx, but we had just gone to Zoom and we're able, so the scale of what we had to do, all three became important to us. Normally we don't like to have multiple different types of technologies, but right now we know the benefit of having those three. And so that's just one example, but that's again, the aggressiveness was paying off for us this time.
Ken, it's funny you're thinking about like those redundancies. We are heavy Slack users. We spend a lot. I mean, I feel like I spend a good portion of my day on Slack, and Slack had a couple of outages recently, and we spoke to them, found out you got their root cause analysis, and spoke to some of their VPs of engineering to make sure that things were okay, and it wasn't systemic issues that we're going to have to be facing for a while. And they assured us that it wasn't. But I had people on our staff that would send me notes and say, what is our backup plan if Slack goes down? And I said, call me really old, but pick up a telephone. I mean, it was just hilarious that people were like, what would I do? It was like telling your kids text isn't available. Sorry, you can't text your friends anymore. You can't get on, house party or whatever it is. It was just mind blowing. And so, but we have had to have discussions about that, what we called continuity of operations or business continuity. What happens if certain things are not available? And we've had some pretty serious discussions about, it used to be that when we were in the office, if something really bad happened, we could all get together and talk about it. Now we're in 1,000 different offices. And so how will we communicate? Are we going to get information out in the event that we can't get to our work systems? So it's been a really interesting exercise in thinking through those scenarios. And I'm sure thinking about vaccine distribution, you guys must be really thinking through all of those various options.
Yeah, absolutely. It's taking a lot of our time and effort and ingenuity of what we absolutely have to do. But to your point about the connectivity, I'll add on one thing that was true also, and why the redundancy. Different parts of the world, there was different performance, and we connect everybody globally every day. So what was the strongest in the U.S. wasn't exactly the strongest in Europe, and so some of those, having the multiple collaboration platforms became advantageous.
Yeah.
Let's switch gears just a little bit, but it's in line with something that Summer just brought up. So David DiLeo, tell us a little bit about your thoughts around business continuity. We talked about this a little bit in our pre-discussion. It used to be, I know our organization talked to companies about building out their plans for business continuity. There's certain things you sort of skip over because that's never going to happen, right? The pandemic's never going to happen. A couple of years ago, people weren't as worried about active shooter. So there's some sort of outliers in business continuity, the things that we never think that are going to happen. Have you at Industrial Scientific started to do anything different about either being able to react quickly or start to look at how would we handle some of these other possibilities that are out there?
Absolutely. And I think, business continuity planning, disaster recovery, as what you just well said, David, has been things that I think we were doing to kind of check the box a bit. Certainly having disaster recovery, having, BCP in place. But, I think as we all look into 2021, it's, again, step change. I think the focus within our company certainly is, this is very real. And as Summer just mentioned, this dependency on a lot of third-party tools, systems that aren't infallible. So, having, at least a strategy that says when Slack goes down, what do you do? Pick up the phone. At least that is, it could be as simple as that. But I think every company now is, more reliant than ever than an ecosystem. And you're only as strong as your weakest link. So we're really taking a hard look. I think, to me, it starts to bring security, BCP, and these are things that, I have to imagine the investment dollars going into each of these going forward is going to be an all-time high, and for good reason. I love the comment that Ken made, how we've kind of collapsed time here. 2025 became 2021, right? And so the rate of change now, and I don't know, the velocity within our company, we are doing in a distributed environment, we're producing a lot more output as well. So the pace of business, certainly within Industrial Scientific, I'd be curious, and with others, has absolutely increased over a year ago, the output. So again, with that, the expectation, the dependency on systems to support that increased pace, never been greater. So we actually, yes, we just kicked off actually a formal BCP effort that we're looking to kind of take what we've done to date, but really shore it up. And it's not about that major, what happens when the data center downtown Pittsburgh or wherever it might be at Iron Mountain isn't available. That's really not the use case. It's really more about the that business side of being able to get work done and recognizing that we're doing it now in an ecosystem. As we've totally shifted a lot of our workloads to the cloud.
Okay. Anybody else on business continuity? I think Summer's comment is perfect, because when we do these reviews with companies, I think a lot of people overthink the solution, and you're right. Sometimes especially because you have to keep things moving. That's the point of continuity, right? I think we underthink it. And yesterday we did a Zoom call, just one funny comment, and somebody actually was on a handset, and everybody said, what is that? Because it looked so funny, as if we were in 2025, like nobody had seen an office handset in several months. But
oftentimes when I'm on calls, my home phone, like the landline, will ring in the background, and people are amazed. They're like, "You have a landline?"
Yeah.
I'm like, "Oh yes, I'm ancient."
some of that crazy stuff.
David, the one thing I'll add, all companies, right? We do BCDR, and us, it's about again, the digital, the technology has to run the operations. So we plan them together. I think the intersection that changed a lot is, we think of BCDR and we think of security. Not that they were disconnected before, but now the integration of those and the importance of security all over the world also, as part of your BCDR, just skyrocketed. So that's the one other thing I'd add. I thought there was great comments there. And the only thing I'd add is just that we see that intersection being more important than ever and taking an increasing percentage of our time and resources.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, Ken. And we're seeing that with a lot of different CIOs, that it is now about that intersection and that integration. Requests for incident response tabletops and sort of going through these exercises, I think, has really gone up, because people realize this isn't something you just do once a year or twice a year for a compliance reason as a checkbox. And it's something that just is, change is going to be inevitable moving forward. We just have to figure out how that works. One last question, and then I want to leave just a few minutes for Q&A, and I know some good questions have come up. What are some of you seeing as your concerns related to cybersecurity for 2021 that maybe is fairly different from what you had on the plate in 2020? What should other CIOs and executives be looking out for?
Well, I think I can start jumping in here, kind of dovetailing right on that BCP, heightened security. I think now we have, as Summer pointed out, you instead of having a single office with 1,000 employees, you've now got 1,000 offices with one employee, and you have equipment and hardware and connectivity into your back office systems which in many cases is out of your control. So managing all of that remote connectivity, the devices, I think, again, using the time warp analogy, somebody asked me about security this year, and I said we packed about 3 years worth of security roadmap into about 8 months, 6 months, and it was really all about how do we get visibility into off-network devices, those that aren't on the VPN. So we've moved a lot of workloads to the cloud, which don't require you necessarily to be on the VPN to access, and do different things. So yeah, I would just say this acceleration into how do you manage all of these distributed entry points into your IP, and it's certainly doing it in a global footprint, recognizing that there aren't there's no walls around things when you're looking at it really through that global footprint. I see some heads nodding, so hopefully some others can chime in here.
Yeah, David, I will jump in on that as well. So not even just looking at the technology and the hardware, networking, and systems as we think about now all of those entry points into our IP, but now we have the additional stress of the psychology of those workers that are not in the space anymore. And so when we think about a traditional insider threat program, right, you think about those that really small percentage that is malicious, that tiny percentage, and the disgruntlement that really is a precursor to taking a bad action. There's now an increased risk of that disgruntlement becoming maybe a bigger percentage of people for a lot of different reasons, not even just about your work, but you're at home and kids are at home now, doing schooling, and you're not able to see a daughter who's in California since March, as Audrey is. So there's that psychological element where you have to think about how do we keep our people mentally happy, engaged. And then there's the much larger percentage of insider threat, which is unintentional, and mistakes that can be made. And thinking about how it can be inconvenient to do certain things that maybe were convenient in the office, and now people want to take shortcuts. And those shortcuts could be detrimental to the security of your organization. So I think it's about staying plugged in with the employees and making sure there's that engagement. And then also finding out what are those sticking points that make it difficult or inconvenient for them to do their jobs, so that you can address those up front before it becomes a mistake, before it becomes something that you have to clean up. And again, now we're doing that in 1,000 different spaces, in 1,000 different circumstances, where it used to be we were all in the same environment and we might handle things differently. Now we're handling things differently in 1,000 different environments. And so I do view that it's a little bit on the softer side. It talks to the psychology, but I think it's really a matter of working closely, your security team working closely with people operations, with managers, giving managers the training to recognize when something might become a problem or an issue, so that you can jump in and find out, hey, David, I noticed that you're having some trouble with this. Is there something that we can do to make that easier? It does both sides. It will help you stop making mistakes and potentially help you from becoming disgruntled with the environment.
That's a great point, because I think one of the things we've certainly spent a lot of time talking about employee well-being in these remote, potentially isolated scenarios. And I love the connection here between well-being and security. I think that's a real valid point, that just to emphasize that, I think is great. And I know that so with that, I think David, to your initial question here, I think that there's been certainly, I think there's a heightened opportunity to start to think about DLP, right? Data loss prevention. How do we put better controls on, frankly, access management? Do we, as an organization, do you understand where your IP is? Do you understand who should be accessing it? Do you know who's trying to access it that shouldn't? So I think there's just, there's some lower level controls that we certainly, there's an opportunity to apply those and start to really map our environments to understand, what's normal behavior, what's not normal behavior.
Yeah, chime in on that point just real quick. Just, the one thing about it, you asked about what are concerns. I think something that's being overlooked is that on March 15th, 2020, we had a lot of customers and employees that were kind of desperate. They had things that they needed in order to move on and survive, so to speak, professionally. By March 15th of 2021, a lot of those needs are going to be expectations. And part of the expectation that's getting lost in this, I read an article where United is saying they think business travel will be back to 2019 levels by 2024. Not everybody's going to do Zoom for every meeting. Human beings want to go back to some extent to the way things were. We saw it in the recession. We even saw it in the Spanish flu. that things to some extent will go back more than people think. People think, well, we're never going to get on a plane. We'll never have face-to-face meetings. Everything's now going to be a Zoom call. Guess what? It's not. As this starts to ease off, there will be an element that goes back the way it was. So now as an IT organization, you have to do both. And I think that people need to be prepared for that. And they're not going to get more money, people, and time in a lot of cases to support both. And I think that that has been way overlooked in preparing to move forward post-COVID. I think it is really overlooked. And so it's going to be interesting, I'll tell you that.
You know, that's a great point, Bill. And one comment I would have, maybe that I would add from my perspective, from what we see, and then we'll move quickly into a Q&A, is that it's really important for the executive teams, for owners of companies to really reevaluate and understand their cyber liability insurance policies. So when we review these policies, there's really three, it's not broken out this way, but usually they're broken into three areas if you really look hard at it. It's external threats, how you're protected against external threats, how you're protected against internal threats, and how you're protected against errors and omissions. And in some of these policies, people think, well, we cover our errors and omissions on another policy. We don't need that, but that's totally different. And some of the insider threats, or some of the pieces such as, phishing attacks, or, paying an invoice for $80,000 that's fraudulent, these pieces aren't covered anymore very often in your cyber liability insurance policies. And while it's sort of not fun, it's sort of like DR was, where all of a sudden, in business continuity, where all of a sudden, like, everybody's paying attention to it. I think that's something that people really need to pay attention to, and make sure that if something hits, they really understand really two things. One, what's in their policy, and then other than their policy, understanding what is the approach that their policy requires in order them to be eligible for a claim. Because there's a lot of things in it that disqualify you. So on the protective side, it's just something that I think it's really important for organizations to look at. And to Bill's point, I think it's under discussed, but it's definitely something very, very important. Let's move. I think we're going to do Q&A. Oh, and like now. So, we're going to take questions until 9:20. It says so. So one of the questions that I saw that came out was simply, and maybe we could just, you probably already discussed it, we could go around real quickly. Reflecting on your year, is there one thing you can think of that you're most proud of from sort of what we expected 2020 to be to where we are today?
I'd be glad to jump in. The resiliency of our people. I mean, obviously we're really proud of our frontline people who are out delivering the world's most important goods, including medical supplies and stuff. But all of our people, and including, the demands and the challenges of how this changed everybody's life and the business demands on them. And, if you look at our team in Pittsburgh here, our FedEx ground company, what used to be peak season 1 month of the year is turned into every single month is managing that. And it's created incredible demand, and people have stepped up. You look at our express company moving the most critical goods around the world. Our teams do our airline technology, our sort technology. They've all had to do different things, and they had to do it while working remote, all the things we just talked about. And then we've had to secure it differently. And so, it's a long answer to say the resiliency of our people, and realizing that what we do, no matter what your company, but every one of us, what we do matters. You got to see it more than ever this year. And so I can't express enough appreciation for all of our team members, and just how the scale and the magnitude of what we've done has been amazing.
I would echo that with Ken, not even just the resiliency, but also the innovative approach that our teams have taken. Deb asked a question in the channel that I responded to, but we had a real challenge when if we're not driving our cars, we're not really testing our software. What we say at Argo is it doesn't work until it works on the car. And so it's really important for our vehicles to be on the road. And, there was a challenge when it came to pandemic rules and what could happen. And wow, did the company roll up its sleeves and come up with some really awesome ways to keep our drivers safe. We have 2 drivers in every vehicle. One's in the left seat, actually, helping to take over if needed. And there's someone in the right seat, but they're both drivers. And we have to have two. It's part of our safety plan. And so coming up with a way that they could safely be in a vehicle together was a big feat. And I'm really proud of the organization for working together to make sure that we could still test our software and do the things that need to happen for us to be successful.
I would add to this a bit too. I think, at Industrial Scientific, we're a global company, and I'm actually leading the COVID response for our executive team, which basically means I stayed in close contact with about 15 people in Asia Pacific, Australia, Europe, et cetera. And it's been interesting to see how we have rallied together around this common enemy, COVID, and the resiliency of the team, the camaraderie. Ultimately, it resulted in us serving our customers without missing a beat. And we continue to do that and just continue to be amazed at the energy and the people continue to put forward as we work through this as a global team, really seamlessly, again, with technology supporting it. Just shining moment for our company and certainly IT.
All right. So I'm trying to see if there's some other questions. I don't know, Audrey, or if anybody else has seen some other questions on there that I'm trying to look through.
No, I mean, there's comments and statements in here that are great.
Yeah.
And I really appreciate Summer. Thanks for putting some explanations in there as well. And I think when we get into the breakout sessions, it'd be cool to talk about the physical office in general and what you see your trends are in terms of talent. I would love to hear that, because those are the conversations I have with a lot of your colleagues, how they find talent now, and what do they think that means for the future? Will they hire people remotely and let them be remote? And does that matter, or does it matter based on the type of work you have? So for example, where summer is, you may need people actually in the office touching things versus, I don't know, Dave at Industrial Scientific, I don't know, the remote piece. So I'd love to be able to hear that. Yeah. That's something I'm hearing from a lot of your counterparts, wrestling with what their talent strategy is.
I certainly can touch a little bit on that now. Even I think I mentioned earlier, within Industrial Scientific, we've started to really look at our office space. Many of you may see we have a pretty significant building out on the Parkway there, right next to Covestro. And on any given day pre-COVID, it had 425 people in it, let's say. And today it has 150 on a good day. And that's who we've identified as essential. So we're looking at that space and saying, how do we optimize that space going forward, with COVID, post-COVID? And we're really looking at this idea of collaborative spaces, creating common areas where people can come now and collaborate safely and then leave, frankly. So we're really, this idea of there will be some based on the work, can you work remotely? We're seeing, hybrid probably going to be the norm. But without a doubt, the number of rooftops that we have globally is something that we really have to, rethink and recalibrate. And then from a talent perspective, we just actually made our first hire within IT, actually, where, would have typically probably been a reload situation. And we kind of said to the individual, no, stay put, travel as needed. This individual hit the ground running, very little ramp up time and learning curve, and is contributing wonderfully. And I think we're seeing more and more of that. And I know at our HR level, we're looking across really serious, probably the future of work and talent, retaining talent, getting access to best talent, regardless of physical location. I think now is, a real reality as we move forward.
So before we break, I just want to tell you that just from the macro view that I have the pleasure of serving of all of you for the tech community, there is pushback that I get from members of the community that say that you're only looking for talent outside. What are we doing to nurture talent inside? And I've been criticized for having that stand. So I would love to be able to talk about those things at some point, if any of you are interested, and I can peel that back. I spent 4 months doing listening sessions on all things that ever since the murder of George Floyd. And I've had a lot of candid conversations that have made me shift my thinking in terms of how we articulate that. So I would love that's selfishly, because that's how Monica and I try to serve the community, by knowing this stuff. So I would love to be able to hear from you, whether it's through this program or off to the side.
That's great.
So I think, Monica, we're going to switch into the
Yes.
networking, and I think we ran a little bit over, so I apologize. I don't know if we're going to just extend that a little bit or make
we'll do 2 10-minute breakout sessions, but we'll bring everybody back into the main room. So if people want to continue the conversation afterwards, after we're done with the breakouts, we can do that as well.
Great.
So great conversation. Thank you so much, David.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And everyone.
Yeah, thank you to all the panelists and everybody here today to attend. I think it was a good discussion. I'm sure if we had more time, we would have much more.
I know, I feel like we can continue this conversation.
I think we could fill it for sure.
And Audrey, thank you that the Pittsburgh Technology Council does for the community. It's the best tech council in the country. I always say that, and we appreciate you and your team. So.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
We're going to go into a breakout and then we all come back together again, Monica?
Yep,
Okay.
absolutely.